There is still some debate about if we are headed into another recession. But no matter when another economic downturn happens, millennials will once again take a big hit. Let's connect the dots. The ongoing trade war and some troubling signs in the market have a lot of economists worried the economy will take a big hit soon. But even if it's not just around the corner, recessions are an inevitable part of the cycle. So when it does hit, millennials are positioned to pay the biggest price, mostly because for them, the last recession has never really ended. When the Great Recession hit, millennials were graduating college, heading into the worst job market in 80 years. They were also burdened with a lot more student loan debt. Half of all millennials took out loans compared to only a quarter of Gen Xers, and millennials borrowed more money. So thanks to low pay and large debt, many could not buy a house when markets did start to recover, one of the best ways to build up a nest egg. Now they're facing an uncertain economic future, already in debt and with little to no savings. Connecting the dots, I'm Melissa Correa for H-Town Rush.
Thank you, Melissa.